Star's Aussie Ironman heroes.
Good luck in the race, brother.
And all new Baywatch, 7:30 Wednesday. The Late Night News brought to you by Hyundai Super Stylish Sonata and Telstra. It doesn't cost much to stay in touch.
Heading the Late Night News, Prime Minister Howard pours cold water on threats of an early election. A Sydney bus driver cleared of blame after the death of a 5-year-old schoolgirl.
I know that I did everything and saw everything that could be done.
And customs officers foiled the biggest ever attempt to smuggle rare bird eggs out of the country.
The Late Night News with Sandra Sully.
Good evening. First tonight, Prime Minister John Howard has clearly stated he has no desire to hold a snap poll, despite budget measures being blocked by the Senate. Mr Howard says he wants to run a full 3-year term, despite threats from his Treasurer, Peter Costello.
Tonight, as Prime Minister Howard opened an exhibition of Paris in the 1890s, he was sending a clear message to the electorate. He doesn't want an election before it's due.
I rule out the desire in my heart to have anything other than a 3-year term.
Threats of a snap poll first came from Treasurer Peter Costello yesterday afternoon. Frustrated by savings measures being blocked by the Senate, Mr Costello indicated the government may use a double dissolution election to get through budget cuts to migrant welfare. Words which sent MPs in Canberra into a frenzy.
This is totally implausible after the event damage control.
I think we all ought to go and have a cold shower about another election. The last thing Australia needs is the speculation of another election to put the economy in reverse.
It also won't cause the opposition and minor parties to change their vote on migrant welfare, leading to a showdown next week when the bill returns to the upper house.
Peter Costello is an interesting combination between Paul Keating and Alexander Downer, I think.
It seems to me that this government has lost the plot very, very early in the piece.
The ethnic lobby is also concerned migrants would be centrepiece of a campaign, given the recent race debate.
I think the Treasurer is showing some naivety there.
And for the first time, Mr Howard has revealed the thought of resigning did cross his mind at the low point of his prime ministership, when his wife was undergoing major surgery.
Did I think of resigning? Well, there may have been circumstances in which I would have, but as things turned out, the answer is no.
Jane Hinchke, 10 News.
2 construction workers are dead after a crane suddenly collapsed on a building site at Tweed Heads on the New South Wales-Queensland border. One worker was killed instantly, the other died later in hospital.
Workers on the Twin Town Services Club site watched in horror as the giant crane came crashing down just before 2 this afternoon. One man died instantly, crushed to death under the weight of the crane. 2 others were trapped.
Sort of like chains cracking and then sort of like a heavy sound. And then just sort of caught out the corner of my eye, the whole crane just fall down.
Frantic workmen tried desperately to pull their colleagues free. One of the men trapped was in critical condition. He died in hospital a short time ago. The 3rd victim has only minor injuries.
People came straight away. I mean, there was a guy there on a mobile phone there just immediately.
Tweed police aren't sure how the accident occurred, but they say strong winds coupled with a heavy load could have caused the tragedy. Work on the site, a new hotel and car park for the RSL, commenced 3 months ago. New South Wales Work Care authorities temporarily shut down the site this afternoon as they began their probe into the cause of the accident. Melissa Toomey, 10 News.
Meantime, 3 men were injured when a balcony collapsed at a surf club on the Gold Coast. The men were standing on this landing when the timber gave way. 2 of the men were treated at the scene for cuts and shock. A 3rd man received spinal injuries. The men were volunteers supervising a group of teenagers from the New South Wales mid-north coast. Police believe rotten wood caused the accident. A Sydney bus driver has been cleared of blame after the death of a 5-year-old schoolgirl. Rachel Donnelly was getting off the school bus with her mother when her foot became caught in the bus door. She died after being dragged along the road.
Rachel's parents shed bitter tears as they left after the court's decision.
Well, I hope it's going to bother his conscience.
for the rest of his life.
On July 20th, 1994, 5-year-old Rachel Donnelly was getting off a State Transit Authority bus when the centre door closed on her foot. Despite rear and side view mirrors, George Howard was unaware of Rachel's predicament as he pulled into the traffic, dragging Rachel several metres along the road.
Our little girl was denied justice. We didn't get justice here.
In dismissing the charge, Magistrate Peter Norton said it was not possible to see Rachel in the internal mirrors because she was below the line of vision. And with a safety cutout fitted to the bus's accelerator, it would be quite unreasonable for a driver to leave his seat to check the door.
I know that I did everything and saw everything that could be done.
So, despite the court's verdict for the Donnellys, the case is far from closed. They're now considering suing both Mr. Howard and the STA. Darren Roberts, 10 News.
New South Wales opposition leader Peter Collins has held an emergency meeting with mining unions to end an indefinite strike by 12,000 workers. The statewide strike was called last night to protest against cuts to miners' benefits pushed ahead by the opposition in Parliament last week. Mr. Collins has offered to retract the amendments to the workers' compensation legislation, which would have cut payouts to injured miners. Striking miners are still considering a return to work. General Motors has denied its best-selling car is a lemon. A newspaper report claims recalls and remedial action on almost 300,000 VR and VS Commodores have blotted the company's quality improvement program.
It's Australia's hottest selling car. 107,000 Commodores have been sold in the past financial year. But this month, a recall of 120,000 to fix a problem which could cause a fire in the engine bay. It's one of the biggest Holden recalls in 20 years. Holden's concedes it's also been replacing anti-theft keys, a radio component and a batch of faulty oil filters. But it says a report in this morning's Sydney Morning Herald has blown the problems out of proportion.
The VS Commodore is anything but a lemon. It's the country's highest selling nameplate and it is, by any measure, external industry or internal Holden measure, an increasingly high quality vehicle.
Mr. Beasley says the transmission problem only relates to automatic vehicles with tow bars, and then only if the cars are misused. He admits the company eventually will modify automatic transmission breather tubes on cars without tow bars, but that's purely as a customer courtesy.
It is a bonus for the owners, but something that we think is the responsible course of action to take, even though there is no safety problem associated with those vehicles.
The company denies the Herald's claim that the Commodore is proving a major embarrassment. The General says other minor problems listed in technical papers are purely to inform dealerships of components which could be faulty with a view to replacing them before problems occur. Mark Smith, 10 News.
Australian wildlife authorities say they have cracked an international bird smuggling ring after seizing one of the country's biggest hauls. A Dutch courier caught smuggling native birds' eggs out of the country was today jailed 18 months for his part in the crime. This is how animal smugglers ply their destructive, lucrative underground trade. In this particular load, 53 eggs destined for Europe, worth $100,000, including the rare red-tailed black cockatoo worth $35,000 and king parrots worth $800 per bird. And the courier, 20-year-old Dutch tourist Menno Ockhuizen, caught by customs officers just before boarding an international flight. Today in district court, he admitted attempting to export prohibited species in August this year.
It's probably would be the largest individual seizure of bird eggs in Australia since the Wildlife Protection Act came into force in 1984.
And these are the survivors of Ockhuizen's smuggling attempt. Of the eggs that hatched, 16 fledglings are now living at Currumbin Bird Sanctuary. Some of the baby birds died while other eggs were smashed. The district court heard this case is indicative of a major organised trade between Australia and Europe. Fauna protection agencies say it nets hundreds of millions of dollars each year for organised crime. The terrible price of the trade, native species dying in the course of travel. For his part in this operation, Ockhuizen was sentenced to 18 months jail to be considered for parole in 6. He's trying to help authorities track down the rest of the smuggling ring. Sharon Marshall, 10 News. Still ahead in tonight's late night news, poor signalling procedures blamed for one of WA's worst rail disasters. A shopping centre sandwich bar at the centre of a food poisoning outbreak. And voted Australia's best TV commercials, but some say they're sexist and racist.
This is me in Bali.
This is me in Rio.
2 people remain in hospital tonight after a salmonella scare at a Melbourne shopping centre. 28 people were affected. A nationwide investigation is now underway to find the source of the infection.
Sandwiches were off the menu at the YACHTING cafeteria today. The sandwich bar was replaced with other food items after health department officials moved in yesterday to try to find the source of the outbreak. 28 people have contracted the illness, 5 hospitalised. Victims are aged between 2 years and 83 years old. The sandwich bar was identified as the likely source of infection after several victims revealed they'd eaten there prior to their illness. It's thought chicken or mayonnaise may have caused the poisoning. Tests done by Myers food supplier Gardner Merchant show some chicken had been infected by salmonella, but further tests are needed.
That won't be known for a little while yet. It's quite possible that the individual start of this was a raw material brought into the premises and then used in a number of different ways.
Myer has agreed to cooperate fully with the health department to ensure there's no further risk to public safety. Gardner Merchant supplies all Myer cafeterias across the country. Health officials are hoping the outbreak is not widespread. Kim Carter, 10 News.
Western Australia's rail authority has been criticised for poor signalling procedures during an inquiry into one of the state's worst rail disasters. The accident east of Perth claimed 2 lives and cost more than $10 million.
Hines Hill, January 14. The mangled wreck of a horror train smash. It should have been a routine crossing of freight trains travelling in the opposite direction. Instead, it claimed 2 lives. Train-mad 11-year-old Bobby Lee Brooks on his first rail trip, and Wayne Monk, the train driver, and a family friend. Both were incinerated.
Accidents happen. Nobody went out there to kill our best friend and our son.
Today, the official verdict on the smash, an accident blamed on poor signal procedures and human error. Coroner Frank Cullen has found the driver failed to stop at a red light, but he still doesn't know why. What he does know is that it was a mistake that began with an ad hoc signal system that had 2 trains crossing such a short space of time and only 1 signal stopping them from running into each other. There are now 2 red lights between trains. He was also critical of the procedure that saw one controller setting up the dangerous crossing manoeuvre, yet another seeing it through. Wayne Monk's widow was among the friends and family who gathered at the Midland Court today for the coroner to publish his reasons. Shocked, the final official chapter in this tragedy took less than a minute. Meanwhile, Westrail says it's already changed some signalling procedures, but maintains its practices were safe. Andrea Burns, 10 News.
A Melbourne man convicted of murdering a 6-year-old schoolgirl has lost his bid for a retrial. The Victorian Court of Appeal has found Robert Lowe must serve life in prison, and police suspect he may be responsible for the murder of another child.
It's 2 years, almost to the day, since Robert Lowe was convicted of Cherie Beasley's 1991 kidnap and murder at Rosebud. And for the first time, police have released their interview with the killer.
I don't care too much about it, no. I didn't do it. It's not my problem. I've never seen the girl. I have no complex about it.
Today, the Supreme Court's full bench dismissed Lowe's bid to overturn the verdict and life sentence. Cherie's grandfather and Lowe's former wife were in court.
I'm glad it's over.
The 3 judges described Lowe's crime against the 6-year-old as vile, with no redeeming features. They referred to Lowe's heartless concealment of Cherie's body in a drain, his previous convictions for indecent exposure, his conversations and conduct after the murder, a striking lack of remorse, and bleak prospects of rehabilitation. Lowe is considering a further appeal to the High Court, but for now he's facing another legal battle. Police are seeking a Supreme Court order to obtain a blood sample from Lowe in their investigation into the 1984 murder of Kylie Maybury. Like Cherie Beasley, the 6-year-old was abducted, drugged and raped during a trip to the shops. Kelly Russell, 10 News.
A marathon rescue operation to save a baby dolphin at Jervis Bay on the New South Wales south coast has failed. She was discovered 2 days ago, stranded on a beach, trapped in this rusty fishing net. The dolphin was wounded and extremely distressed, but locals rallied around the clock to save her. Late yesterday, an attempt to return her to the ocean failed. The dolphin's condition deteriorated overnight, and this morning she was given a lethal injection on veterinary advice. The National Parks and Wildlife Service and the Whale and Dolphin Rescue Team, ORCA, oversaw the procedure. Sexist and racist, that's what some critics are calling 2 television commercials which have been named 2 of our best. Despite the complaints, they've taken out major advertising awards.
This is one of the best ads on Australian television, winning its category at the Writers and Art Directors Awards in Sydney. But some say it's sexist.
This is me in Rio.
The commercial for Rio underwear prompted several complaints to the Advertising Standards Council. For example, I urge that this ad be removed because of its detrimental impact on women. And another, my children are not exposed to a woman opening her dress and showing herself standing in underwear, and neither should they be. This commercial for Simpson washing machines also took out a major award, but it's been branded racist.
So they're solid as a rock.
One complaint referred to the ad as most offensive, ridiculous, extremely obnoxious, insolent, highly racist and very discriminatory. Another said the advert racially vilified the Indian people by suggesting they are ignorant and backward. Despite the complaints, the Advertising Standards Council found that neither ad was in breach of the Code of Ethics. In fact, it described them as original and entertaining ways to sell a product. The agency responsible for the ads, Campaign Palace, says it's particularly careful not to offend on the grounds of race or sex. Mark Gibson, 10 News.
When the late night news continues, Victoria makes another lucrative sporting coup. Meet the man whose voice is worth millions.
After all these years, things are finally starting to go my way. You haven't made enough money in your mint to buy me doing Mr. Burns.
And in sports tonight, Australia forced to fight back in the second test.
We loves them there. That's well played. It's way down to the boundary. And that...
Victoria has made yet another sporting coup. It's won the right to host the World Sailing Championships in 1999. Premier Jeff Kennett says the titles will inject $30 million into the economy by attracting 5,000 officials and competitors. A smug Mr Kennett says the titles will be 11 times larger than the yachting program for the Sydney Olympics. In finance news tonight, Australian shares edge slightly higher today, buoyed by positive reaction to the National Australia Bank's share buyback. The All Ordinaries closing just over 2 points higher. Among the leading stocks today, NAB set a new record high, surging 46 cents. BHP slipped 16, CRA climbed 9. Pasminco gained 6, Woodside Petroleum fell 7, while Coca-Cola Amatil clawed back more of its recent heavy losses. The Aussie dollar is trading tonight at 80.97 US cents, 48.11 pence and 92.1 yen. Gold is trading at $372.10 US an ounce. The FT 100 share index is up 4.3 points in morning trade. The Hang Seng closed up 83 points. The Nikkei is also up 15 points. Works of art have always been considered good investments, but cartoons? Interest in cartoon art is on the rise, and a rare collection of pieces from The Simpsons is about to go on sale in Sydney.
Oh, okey dokey. I didn't want to do it, but you made me do it. Okey dokey.
If the voice sounds familiar, try putting it to this face.
Dear Lord, that's the loudest profanity I've ever heard.
Or this one.
What I'm about to say violates every sycophantic urge in my body. Oh, I think it's a certain manly grace, a certain power, a hawk-like authority.
The voice of some of the most fascinating Simpsons characters belongs to Harry Shearer, actor, writer, director and radio host.
Pish posh! It would be like taking candy from a baby. Yes, you'd love Mr. Burns, wouldn't you? You haven't made enough money in your mint to buy me doing Mr. Burns. I hope you know that. Get back to work, Angela.
Harry is in Australia to autograph a special collection of comic art from the famous Who Shot Mr. Burns episode, which is on sale at the Key West Hotel in Sydney this weekend. Animation cells are becoming the investment trend of the 90s. Each one is the original hand-painted movement, which is then photographed to make the cartoon. They range in price from $850 to $1,200, but because they're all one-offs, they're expected to increase in value by at least 15% in just 5 years.
Very few of these get released. Fox sits on them, you know. Rupert has, you know, big stacks of them in his garage, and that only lets a few out at a time.
Angela Bishop, 10 News.
I'm a fan. Still to come in the late night news, the weekend weather, and then the 1 hour edition of Sports Tonight. And Tim, Australia's struggling a bit in the second test.
Yeah, recovered towards the end, but the Windies firing at the SCG Sandra, the Greg Norman Holden Classic, the best racing tips, of course, and lots more in a jam-packed show. And, of course, those crazy old plays of the week.
Bringing it home. Oh!
Time now to check out the weather, and it was a fine day across the top end today. Cairns 30 degrees, Brisbane 32, a little hazy in Sydney, cloudy in Canberra, a bit wet in Melbourne and 22 degrees, cloudy in Adelaide and fine and warm in Perth and 32. The whole country is virtually cloud-free at the moment, with just some patches of cloud across the southern half indicating isolated showers. A deep low will move into the Bight tomorrow. There'll also be a trough of low pressure over southern Queensland and a ridge of high pressure over New South Wales. So tomorrow we can expect a fine day in Queensland, Brisbane a hot 33 degrees, Sydney should be sunny and 24, but Melbourne is expecting a few showers and 20 degrees. Showers too for Hobart and 17, it should be fine in Adelaide and 24, showers and 23 for Perth, fine in Broome and a late storm for Darwin, a hot one for the Alice though, and 41 degrees. Yep, it's that time of the year. That's it from the Late Night News team for this Friday, the 29th of November. 10 News will be back first at 5, but right now it's time for Sports Tonight with Tim Webster. We'll leave you now with the annual Thanksgiving parade in New York. I'm Sandra Sully. Have a wonderful weekend. See you Monday. Good night.
The Late Night News brought to you by Hyundai Super Stylish Sonata and Telstra. It doesn't cost much to stay in touch.
8:30 Tuesday.
You are so wicked.
She's Savannah's most ambitious beauty.
We're gonna get rich together.
She's spinning a web of deceit.
That is very sick.
Turning on the charm and plotting revenge.
I know everything. I'm your sister.
Savannah, Tuesday on 10.
This program proudly brought to you by the effortless Maxima V6. Just wait till you drive it.
Just wait till you drive it.
In Sports Tonight, Friday, November 29, the Windies turn on the heat, but the Aussies fight back in the second test. Wet weather blues at the Greg Norman Classic, and it's a four-way split for the lead. The Scud gives his critics a serve. Philippoussis says back off over coaching changes. Stay tuned. We're tumbling into an action-packed edition of Sports Tonight. Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Tim Webster. Also tonight, a full wrap on the day's Sheffield Shield fixtures. David Campese to play one more test for the Wallabies, another boxing blue for Joe Bugner, the talent drain from our Women's Basketball League, and of course our regular racing preview with all the tips from the experts, so stay there. First, Shane Warne may yet cause some trouble for the West Indies, but Ian Healy is fast becoming their #1 thorn in the side. At stumps on day one of the second test in Sydney, he's unbeaten on 44 after sharing an innings-saving 93-run stand with Greg Blewett, who's on 58 not out. One stage, the Aussies were 4 for 94, but recovered to be 5 for 224.
We'll have a bet, mate.
A confident start from Australia's captain. His decision putting immediate pressure on the West Indies paceman on a pitch with early moisture. But the search for wickets hit a dry spell.
It's only a short boundary in that area.
50 runs in the first hour. In the second, a sudden turnaround launched by Ian Bishop.
That's very, very well caught. Brian Lara takes the catch. Very nearly cut off. Got him, he's caught it, short extra cover. They put that man there specifically.
Matthew Elliott, 29, Mark Taylor, 27, 2 for 73 at lunch. By the first ball after.
Shouts of catch and a fumble, but eventually the catch is taken.
Ricky Ponting, 9. Mark Waugh next for 19. Courtney Walsh striking again. The innings teetering at 4 for 94. Michael Bevan willing to wear the badges of battle, and Greg Blewett keen to draw his own sword, dug in.
It's gone over the top.
The session's only other casualty, English umpire David Shepherd taking the lead of his soccer peers. No jokes about the next send-off. Bevan on 16, lasting just 4 balls after tea.
Yes, driving and well caught by Carl Hooper.
5 for 131, the face of the fallen, replaced by the form fighter.
Oh, he loves him there.
Some luck for his partner, missed by Brian Lara.
In the air, dropped. Lara, second go.
A painful fumble, every run helping Australia's recovery and the test campaign of Steve Waugh's stand-in.
There's 50 for Greg Blewett, well played.
Lara left brewing his mistake and soon to be joined by Robert Samuels. Blewett dropped again, Australia fighting back.
Test discard Michael Slater had a fine knock in the Shield match between New South Wales and Tassie. Michael made 76 as the Blues reached 8 for 263 at stumps against the Tigers.
It didn't take long for the Tigers to make the early breakthrough they were hoping for. Michael DiVenuto brilliant, Rod Davidson out for 5 off Miller. Michael Slater then took on the role as chief run scorer and entertainer, smacking the recalled Mark Ridgway to the fence twice in 1 over. He brought up a well-deserved half-century and 71 balls with a 2 off Young. With the score on 87, Miller grabbed his second scalp to the delight of his teammates. Corey Richards trapped in front for 21. It then got worse for the visitors. Shane Lee sent back to the pavilion without facing a ball, trying to take a run that wasn't there. New South Wales stumbling to lunch at 3 for 99. After the break, Slater looked to continue where he left off, upping his score to 76. But next ball, he was on his way, Mark Atkinson taking the catch off Young. After a short rain delay, Greg Matthews and Kevin Roberts took the score to 4 for 136 before scurrying off again. Over an hour lost to the wet with play extended to make up for the loss. The Tigers taking the honours on the opening day.
At the Gabba, Andrew Bickle has ripped through the Victorian batting lineup. Bickle grabbing 5 for 46 as the Bushrangers crashed to the all-out for 162. In reply, the Bulls 1 for 100 at stumps.
Andy Bickle may have been a bit wayward with his first delivery, but he didn't take long to get the radar working. His first victim, opener Warren Ayres, tickling one through to keep a second. The score, 1 for 14. He then gave Michael Foster a typical fast bowler's welcome before combining with Andrew Simons. And the number 3 was headed back to the dressing room without troubling the scorer. Victoria in trouble at 2 for 16, but worse was to come for the Bushrangers. Jones was gone and the Bushrangers were 3 for 24. Bickle 3 for none off 8 balls. And the Vicks could have been in more strife if Wade Seckham had held this chance off Adam Dale. But Bickle was the man of the moment, even getting acknowledgement from Laurie Harper, while at the other end, Dale continued to tie up Brad Hodge. The pair survived the morning session, Harper taking 56 minutes to get off the mark. After lunch, Harper and Hodge opened their shoulders until that man Bickle stepped in again. Victoria 4 for 76. Adam Dale joined the party, trapping Harper in front for 24, Victoria 5 for 90, and combining with Barsby to dismiss Harvey. The Bushrangers now 6 for 97. Saker then went for a duck and Berry for 5, and although the tail added valuable runs at the end, Victoria was all out for 162. Hayden and Barsby came out blasting. The only hiccup, Hayden falling for 18. But an effortless 50 from Barsby, helping Queensland to 1 for 100 at stumps, has virtually assured the Bulls of first innings points at least.
Brendan Julian and Tom Moody took the bowling honours for Western Australia at the Adelaide Oval. Julian 4 for 77, Moody 3 for 30. South Australia all out for 277.
The Redbacks were red-faced early. Brendan Julian had Ben Johnson caught behind without scoring. South Australia 1 for 4 in the second over. Skipper Jamie Siddons joined Adam Kimber and the pair set about building a respectable total. But Kimber had scored only 21 when Tom Moody broke through. And with the last ball before lunch, Angel and Brad Hogg combined. Siddons gone for 29. South Australia struggling at 3 for 80. Darren Lehman didn't play in South